Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
By entering the house one afternoon after work, did the husband hear something he shouldn't have, or did he still not? Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. Like most men, I've watched adult films in my life. Okay, I've seen a lot of them. But I was also on the internet, reading stories about divorce and cheating. I read them to help me cope with what I was going through at the time and to understand how someone very close to me felt when he went through it. I've always had my opinions about how the guys in these stories dealt with their wives and those they cheated with, and under no circumstances would anyone think that I would become a cuckold or a doormat. It's just not in my nature. I've always had a very clear opinion about what I would do in a situation like this, but I never thought I would actually have to do it. One of the reasons is that most of us talk a lot when we are not in that situation, but when it happens to us, everything we thought and all our show of cruelty goes away when your heart is ripped out of your chest, still beating, and not from some fictional character. Everything becomes different. Most of these stories start with the guy coming home early and seeing someone else's car in his driveway. In my case, I did come home early, but the car in my driveway was all too familiar to me. Unlike those guys in the stories, I knew from halfway down the street that something was wrong. I parked my Mustang GT 3 houses down from mine and waved to my retired neighbor, Benson Du Bois, whose house I was parked next to. I walked down the street as quickly and quietly as possible. I opened my front door as quietly as possible too. I heard the bed springs creak as soon as I entered the house. My blood pressure must have jumped at least 50 points, but my brain worked clearly. I knew my wife was upstairs, and I knew who she was with. I've known that man since we were kids, and we fought over Katie until I finally married her to end the competition. On one hand, the news that Katie was having a night with this idiot came as a shock to me. He and I had become good friends over the past 12 years since I married Katie. There were a lot of guys I thought might one day stab me in the back, but he wasn't one of them. I think I just learned the definition of a false friend. On the other hand, it gave me a chance to do something I've wanted to do for years, so I didn't immediately run upstairs. The man upstairs, having an intimate with my soon-to-be ex-wife, was Josh Patterson. We grew up 3 houses apart and have known each other all our lives. He always thought he was some kind of Superman. We disagreed on every issue and were always competitive since we played Little League soccer and baseball. I loved action movies like any other real American man. He preferred French art house films, at least in public. He was a jerk from the start. He was always the one on movie day at school to suggest some foreign movie that none of us had ever heard of. This was just one of his ways to prove his superiority over the others. When we saw one of the films he suggested, he was usually the one who didn't understand it. His explanation was that the version we saw was a remake and the original was much better. He loved European sedans and pretended to collect art. I love old muscle cars, and I drive new muscle cars. I can admit it right now, I'm obsessed with Mustangs. So, quietly leaving my house, I went into the kitchen and took a screwdriver, a hammer, and a cup of sugar. I walked up to the BMW parked behind my Jeep with a pleasure I could never have imagined. I stabbed the screwdriver into the tires one by one. I smiled with joy as I heard the air whooshing out of the expensive rubber as it protested the violation of its structural integrity. No one should treat a nice car like this. I looked around and made sure no one was watching. I thought I saw someone behind a tree, but I wasn't sure. I tried to open the gas cap and found it locked. The screwdriver came to the rescue. I opened the cap, removed it, and then peed in his gas tank. Then I poured all the sugar in there. I threw the hammer on the ground, deciding I would come back for it later. I quietly entered the house again and quickly but quietly walked up the stairs. I heard Josh grunt and Katie sound as I walked up the carpeted steps. "You're doing it wrong," she complained. "But I'm doing it," he panted. "I think I'll choose someone else next time. I still don't understand why you wanted to do this. You're Brian's friend." "Brian and I always competed for everything," he panted. "That idiot stole you from me," he continued. "You've always been my girl. He tricked you right out of my arms. We may have been friends on the surface, but I've been waiting for the right moment to get back at that man, and now I've done it. It really feels good. I feel strong, like a jungle animal. I'm the king of the jungle, baby. Even you can't ruin my mood, Katie, he said. Nothing you can say affects me. I stole and raped another man's woman. In the language of the jungle that only men understand, I now have power over Brian. Every time we compete in something, I will have an advantage because deep down, I will know who is the better and more masculine man. I feel like a lion that has just attacked defenseless prey. But you look more like a fly that just encountered something stinking, I said loud enough for them to hear. I was hiding behind the door, filming videos and taking pictures with my iPhone. I was going to use this high-definition video and audio as evidence in my divorce proceedings. Unfortunately, Katie didn't say anything that could be used against her. It didn't matter, I had what I needed. I carefully put the phone away and began to move towards the bed. I immediately realized that something was wrong. I heard a mixture of screams and soothing voices coming from the bed. Josh was screaming like a girl, and Katie was trying to calm me down. It really should have been the other way around. Brian, calm down, Katie said. Honey, it's not what you think. If I wanted to cheat on you, I would choose someone better. I'm calm, I said, punching Josh in the nose as hard as I could. He fell off the bed to the other side and began trying to get to his feet, backing away from me. Josh, use your karate. Katie shouted as I approached him. Seriously, Katie? I said. We were both forced to watch Josh practice karate at the local Y with his 6-year-old son. Josh took a stance with his fist extended and one leg behind the other, just like in his karate class. Horse stance now. I shouted, mimicking his instructor in class. To my laughter, Josh went into a horse stance. The horse stance looks funny, you spread your legs very wide as if you were riding a horse. Josh really helped me, he took a small leap and landed softly on his toes in a horse stance. Now, imagine a 225-pound man plummeting to the ground under the influence of gravity. This man comes firmly into contact with a rapidly rising leg of a man weighing 170 pounds who has put all his strength into the blow. How many factors do we have here? Mass, speed, gravity, impact, and force? If you count them, to hell with it. When my foot hit Josh between the legs, he screamed so loudly that the International Space Station probably heard him. Why does one man kick another man between the legs, knowing how much it will hurt? That's why, because we know how much it will hurt, and we want the man to suffer. The hit must have been good. I'm no expert, but I thought the punch was solid and got the right reaction from my opponent. After that long, high-pitched scream, Josh fell to his knees and then to his face, writhing in pain and screaming. Josh! I shouted to get his attention. He was still lying on his side, holding his, well, you understand, right? Anyway, he looked at me as he lay there, vibrating with pain, so I'm sure he understood me. You're right, Josh, I said. You're the best man. You took my woman away from me. I can't live with this shame, so take that with you. Get out of my house now, or I'll make the pain between your legs seem like nothing. He looked at me with confusion, but he was in too much pain to try to speak. He didn't have to because Katie, clearly upset, jumped off the bed and tripped over Josh's body, still writhing on the floor. Katie is not a small woman, even at 5 feet 4 inches to my 5 feet 9 inches. She weighs 20 pounds more than me. I truly believe it was Katie's fall on Josh that broke his ribs and nearly killed him. What are you talking about, Brian? She asked. This is not how it should be. We need to talk about this. You and Josh can discuss anything, I said calmly, but the only thing to do here is for you to leave. But, she began, her eyes quickly filling with tears and her lips trembling. Katie is quite an attractive woman from the neck up, until she starts crying. I think this is one of the reasons why, during the 12 years of our marriage, I constantly gave in to her. She's terribly ugly when she cries. That was great! I shouted. You sounded like a motorboat. Now, get out of my house. Brian, look at Josh, she said. I've seen that fat idiot too many times, I said, but I turned to see what she was talking about. Josh was lying on the floor, turning blue. I ran up to him and began to massage his heart. Move away, she said. I weigh more than you. I can do better compressions. You breathe for him. To hell with you, I spat. You slept with him, now you blow him. While Katie snorted, I had an idea. I sat on Josh's chest and started jumping up and down, squeezing it. Meanwhile, I called 911 on my iPhone. As soon as the call ended, I went back to regular compressions. Josh regained consciousness before the ambulance arrived. We made him comfortable. I had an encounter with a hammer. I went outside and broke every glass or plastic part on that European piece of crap in my driveway. I stopped only to direct the paramedics into the house and show them where Josh was lying. Damn it, he's like a whale, said one of the paramedics. Why do these fat idiots always pass out at the top? Asked his partner. Damn, he's already unconscious. Let's just get his fat fifth place down the stairs, the first guy said again. Then they looked at me as if they hadn't noticed that I could hear them. Just kidding, sir, the first guy said, smiling when he saw me listening to their conversation. Oh, my back, the second guy said as they lifted the stretcher with Josh on it. Why is this dude without clothes? Asked one of them. To hell with it, said the second guy. Damn, I only weigh 159 pounds. That fat chick's fifth place outweighs me, the first guy said again. It was then that Katie noticed she was still without anything. As soon as the paramedics brought Josh down to the first floor, they called out to us, "Are either of you going to the hospital with him?" "She'll meet you there," I said, "and I'll call his wife." They loaded Josh into the ambulance, and it drove off with sirens blaring. Katie looked at me shyly. "Get dressed and go to the hospital." "Your lover probably needs your help," I said. "Brian, we need to talk about," she began. "Get dressed and go to the damn hospital, or wherever you're going," I spat. "When you're done checking on Josh, go see one of your girlfriends. Don't come back here today, Katie. I don't want to see or hear from you." "I mean it." She got into her car and drove off to catch up with the ambulance. I went back outside, still in a murderous mood. When I came out, I was disappointed. There was practically nothing left of the car that could be destroyed. Benson and several of my neighbors had already taken sledgehammers to it. "I always hated that idiot," Benson said, grinning at me. "I can't believe he had the nerve to sneak up on your house while you were gone. He was carried out of here on a stretcher. Has he seen any of you?" I asked. "Yes, but what could he do?" asked Clayton Endicott, another retiree in his 70s. "Was he going to get off that stretcher and get his fifth place kicked again?" I just shrugged and went back into the house. I called a locksmith and asked him to come right away to change all the locks on my doors. I reprogrammed the garage remote and put my car back in the garage. I made myself a sandwich and started looking for ads on the internet to find a good lawyer. I was furious to learn that it wasn't as easy as those damn stories made it seem. I remembered those radio commercials about Adam, the group that specializes in divorce proceedings for men. Yes, I hissed with an evil glint in my eyes. I was going to call Adam, and we were going to nail this worthless cheater. Adam and I would pin her cheating fifth place to the damn wall. Fueled by my rage and righteous indignation, I called them. Adam will feel my pain. I knew that, bound by the spirit of brotherhood and male unity, I would find solace with Adam. After all, they are men, they will understand this. I quickly realized the truth when a woman answered the phone. Then she put me on hold. I think I ate and shaved twice before she picked up the phone again. Yes, Adam is a divorce association for men, just like their advertising says, rich men. I'll never be able to afford them. After talking to the guy on the phone, I felt like they were going to screw me 3 times, first by Katie and Josh, the second time by the court, and the third time by Adam. And I wasn't going to let Adam screw with me. I quickly hung up. Besides, the guy I spoke to on the phone had already given me enough information to know that no matter what I did, the cheapest option would be to go back to Katie. Any other option would cost me more money than this cheating tramp is worth. I sat down on the couch and began to consider my options. Realizing that Katie was gone, I put my feet up on her favorite couch. To hell with her and this sofa, I said out loud, then I kicked one of her throw pillows onto the floor. I didn't have much time to think before I fell asleep. I woke up and looked at the clock, realizing that I had been asleep for almost an hour. It was almost 6 o'clock in the evening. I quickly went upstairs, changed into running clothes, and headed to the park for a run. When I arrived at the park, I noticed that one of the old men who always ran around the same time as me was there. I waved to him as always, and he waved back, but he looked sad. To think, I hadn't seen him in the park in over a week. While I was running, I was thinking about the divorce. Katie should have realized that I wasn't the right person to pull this crap with. She knew my story and my family's story. She probably just couldn't resist Josh after all these years. Maybe she just never forgot him. Maybe this was her way of having it both ways. And I couldn't believe that Josh would do that too. It's not like he was any great friend to me. We became friends more out of convenience, because we were the last ones left, rather than for any other reason. Everyone else we grew up with has already moved away. The reason I thought it was stupid was because Josh was also married, and his wife was beautiful. Josh was married to Pearl Christian. I don't know how he convinced her to marry him, but this woman was the stuff of dreams. She was slim, blonde, beautiful, and the sweetest woman in the world. Why he cheated on her with my pear-shaped wife was beyond me. But then I remembered an article I read that said most people cheat with less attractive partners. Josh cheated with a woman who was much less attractive than his wife. Hey, if that article was true, it meant I was better than Josh. I love the internet. After a few laughs, I became serious. I decided that maybe, instead of going the traditional route, I would have to go the JPB route. JPB is just plain Bob, one of my favorite writers who has a talent for exposing the truth. One of the things Bob often writes about is how men can't trust the courts when it comes to getting a fair divorce. 9 times out of 10, the poor guy ends up in a tiny, disgusting apartment, eating tuna for the rest of his life, even if it wasn't his fault. He ends up supporting his worthless wife, who usually brings her lover to their house so that he can support them both. Hell, I'd kill them both first. If this were a just plain Bob story, I'd have a crazy plan that would end with them both being run out of town, tarred and feathered by the entire town. I would also end up with Pearl, and she would fall in love with me. Unfortunately, in real life, no one in town cared about what they did except me and maybe a few of my half-crazed neighbors who really needed something to do after the Jerry Springer show ended. Either way, Bob had one thing right in many of his stories: the guy simply moves away and moves on with his life without divorcing the cheating wife. I spent some time researching this online and found out that legally, a man and woman are not obligated to live together just because they are married. I decided that no matter what happened, Katie and I were done. Now, on the internet, there will be a new hot woman in this place, smelling and looking great. She'll instantly fall in love with the average Joe and gracefully jump over crowds of rich guys, politicians, bodybuilders, and just plain losers. When I finished my run, I started looking for her. I looked behind the trees. I looked at the benches. I remembered that in one of those stories, the couple started out by having a night in the bushes in the park. I dived into the bushes, trying to find her, but found nothing. Damn, I was so angry at Bob and all these other writers on the internet. There were thorns in my hair and socks as I emerged from the bushes with a grimace on my face. "What were you looking for?" asked another runner. Remember him? This was the guy I said I never talked to. He chose one of the most humiliating moments in my life to start a conversation with me. Upon closer inspection, he didn't look much like a runner. Up close, he looked older and, frankly, crazy. I didn't want to tell him that I was looking for my imaginary perfect woman that writers on the internet had promised me, so I showed him my keys. "You look kind of strange," he said. "Even when you were running, you didn't look as focused or happy as usual. Trust me, I know what it's like." Oh great, I thought. It's about to start. "Please, old man, don't tell me about your problems or your life story." But he started anyway. He chatted endlessly about his youth on the mighty Mississippi and 1,000 other useless facts and trivia. Finally, he told me about how his only son, about my age, had recently died of a sudden brain aneurysm, which was probably genetic because it ran in his family. Just when I started hoping that his aneurysm would burst too, he surprised me. He actually asked about my problems. There must be something about the kindness of strangers because I just poured my heart out to him. And unlike what I did to him, he actually listened to me whine about Katie and what she did, and how unfair divorce laws were. I even told him, since I thought we didn't know each other from Adam, that I was seriously thinking about just disappearing. After that, he just smiled at me and said, "See you tomorrow." When I got back to the car, I actually felt better. I began my usual post-run rituals. I had a towel in the trunk and wiped off all traces of sweat twice, then I put on my tracksuit. I wasn't cold, I just wanted to make sure I didn't damage the leather upholstery of my car with any of my unpleasant odors or liquids. When I opened the door, I noticed that my iPhone was ringing. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered just for fun. "Brian, this is Pearl," she began. Even her voice reminded me of clouds, roses, twin-screw superchargers, and other wonderful things. "We need to talk," she continued. "Can you come and get me out of jail?" "Pearl, I can't imagine you in prison," I said. "What have you done?" "Oh, I got into a big fight in the hospital with your wife," she said. "It started when I was trying to figure out why my husband was in the emergency room without anything as a newborn with 2 broken ribs and his nose pushed so deep into his head that he had lost at least 3 points. They said if you'd hit him a little harder, you would have killed him. They asked me to bring him clothes. When I arrived, I asked them what happened to his clothes. They told me that he was without clothes when they took him and then gave me your address. That's when things got interesting. I entered the emergency room and heard my fat husband talking to the medical staff. He was asking for painkillers and screaming about how much pain he had between his legs. I thought he had suffered some kind of injury at work. I went up to him and asked what had happened. He began to tell me that they gave him something and it put him to sleep. The nurse standing there told me, "We didn't give him anything." That's not true. I started to suspect something wasn't right. Then your wife came to me, apologizing and promising that she would fix everything, but her first priority was to talk to you. I asked her what she was talking about, but she tried to get rid of me, acting like she had already said too much. Then I asked her why Josh was without clothes at your house and what had happened. Everything became clear. "I think you caught them doing something, right?" she asked. Anyway, she tried to ignore me and go over to Josh, telling him not to talk to you until she figured it out. She told him not to talk to anyone because she was going to work things out. The man has actually opened his eyes and nodded to her. But as soon as he saw me coming, he went back to pretending to be asleep. So, I grabbed her shoulder to push her away, then grabbed her by the hair and threw her across the room. Unfortunately, she knocked down one of the nurses, and the guards separated us and called the police. The only person who can get me out, with Josh in the hospital, is you. And since you're the one I need to talk to about this, can you please come and get me?" she asked in her childish voice. "I'll be right there," I said, and hung up. Almost as soon as I did, the phone rang again. I answered immediately. "Brian, honey, I need you to come and get me." "I'm in jail," Katie said. "To hell with you." "I hope you rot," I replied, hanging up. I went straight to the station and asked where Pearl was. I was told she was in the last cell on the right. I looked around the room. There were several cells along the walls, with a large counter in the center where a serious-looking guy was reading a newspaper. There was a telephone and an ATM. As I got closer to the cells, I could see their occupants through the screen that blocked them from seeing the outside of the cell. Katie stood up and started screaming at me. "Brian, honey," she screamed at the top of her lungs. "I knew you'd come for me. I just knew it. You'll see, we'll work it out and be even happier than before." Her words were cut off as I walked past her and continued walking. I motioned to the guy at the counter, and he came over. "I'm here to save one of your puppies," I said. "Be careful," he replied. "Not all of them are vaccinated. That one there, for example, is dangerous." "Yes, I know," I said. "She's my wife." "Sorry, man," he said. "I didn't mean to." "Don't worry," I told him. "You're right." "Well, you need $500 to get her out," he said. "I didn't come for her." "How much for the blonde?" I asked. He looked at me curiously. "Are you serious?" he asked. I nodded. "Well, Pearl can go with you for only $250, he told me. "Why the difference?" I asked. Both were detained for disturbing the peace, he said. The arresting officers didn't charge them with additional offenses because they were both emotionally distressed. But your wife continued to be rude and had to be subdued. She was just a general irritant. It's better to annoy you than me, I said. Can I have a few minutes with Pearl? Of course, he said and led me to her cell. Thanks for coming, Brian, she said quietly. I'm wondering how you're going to get us both home without us tearing each other's hair out. Are you going to charm us into acting like ladies until we figure it out, or are you going to control us and make us obey? Neither, I said. I'm just here for you. I'm leaving her 5th place in jail. The paperwork will probably take a while, but as far as I'm concerned, she's not my problem anymore. First time, huh? She asked. Well, don't waste your money on my bail. Here's Josh's card. The pin is his birthday, 9676. Withdraw enough money so we can have dinner and talk about it too. That's exactly what I did. I went to the ATM and withdrew $400. I got Pearl out of jail. The screams as I walked out and left Katie in her cell were incredible. She screamed like a scalded cat. We had a great dinner at Texas Roadhouse, and Pearl told me the whole story. It turned out that Josh had cheated on Pearl before. I listened to her story, with tears in her eyes, about how she had caught him before but was still trapped just like now. Their son worshipped his father, and she simply couldn't hurt the boy because of what his stupid father had done. One day she would leave him, but not until their son was old enough to handle it. If this were an internet story, I would have an intim with her in every possible way, and we would discover that we have a unique ability to pleasure each other in a way that no one else on earth could. We would become spiritual comrades forever, and nothing could separate us. In real life, not only did I not get any night, I didn't even get a goodbye kiss. Hell, I didn't even get a handshake. But I made a new friend. When I pulled into the driveway and walked towards the house, I was really happy. I liked Pearl, she was a truly special woman, and I had a great time. I was humming a happy tune when something jumped out from the darkness of my porch and scared the crap out of me. So, did you have a good time with Pearl? Are we even now? Do you know how long I've been sitting here? Screamed Katie. My key doesn't fit. I had to relieve myself in the rose bushes. My 5th place is all scratched up. Do you know what a constant pain in the 5th place is? I left that unanswered, it was too easy. Why are you here? I asked calmly. We'll talk about this like adults and make peace, she said. You really don't understand what's going on here, and you're doing it all wrong. She was just talking nonsense, so I walked past her and closed the door. Then I closed it again because she was standing too close. I couldn't go inside without slamming the door on one of her body parts and ending up in jail on some flimsy assault charge. Wait here, I said. It's going to rain tomorrow. I need to put the car in the garage. Everyone but you can let their cars get wet, she said. Who owns the Mustang, you or it? Do you know how stupid that is? Do you know how stupid it is to fall for the old I need to garage my car trick? She whispered under her breath. I used the remote inside the car to open the garage door and drove the car inside. I then closed the door behind me and entered the house through the connecting door. Once inside, I turned on the TV and started watching the news. Katie started knocking on the door and demanding to be let in. I turned off the light and went to bed. It only took about 20 minutes before the police arrived. When they knocked on the door, I shouted from the window that I would come down. I opened the door and went out onto the porch. Good evening, sir, the officer began. This woman is claiming that you won't let her into her house. We received a call about some crazy woman causing a disturbance. What's going on here? This is my future ex-wife, I said, yawning as if they had woken me up. I caught her cheating and kicked her out of the house. I went inside and took my phone, showing them the video. 2 whales, said one of the officers, then realized that Katie was one of the whales. Sorry, ma'am. To hell with you, she snapped. No way, he replied. Anyway, I continued, I kicked her out in anticipation of our divorce. The house is mine alone, I bought it before we got engaged. Wait a second, don't let her in my house. I went to the office and got a copy of my mortgage and deed. I brought them back and showed them to the officers. They nodded and told Katie to leave. "Where should I go?" she asked. "Anywhere but here," I said sarcastically. "Katie, I'll pack all your things and leave them outside for you. You can pick them up tomorrow. I'll even leave them on the porch if it rains. Unlike you, I have a job, so I'll start with a few boxes each day before the weekend. On Saturday, I'll throw all your things out of the house." "Brian, I don't want to get a divorce," she cried. "We need to sit down and discuss this like rational adults." Yes, I said. "Good night, officers." The next day, when I returned home from work, I was surprised to see my father waiting for me. "Hey, son, can we talk?" he asked. I nodded, wondering what he wanted. I love my father. He practically raised me alone. There were very few things I wouldn't do for him. "What are your plans for the evening?" he asked. "Lift some weights and then go for a run," I said. "Nothing special." "Can we talk for a little while, and then you can go running?" he asked. "Of course," I said. I opened the door, and he explained to me that Katie was staying with him and my mom. As soon as he mentioned my mother, my stomach started to hurt. I knew Mom would take Katie's side. They'll try to feed me some stupid Oda talk with girl power elements that will make it look like it's all my fault. He thought it would be a good idea if we all got together and talked about it. "No, Dad," I said. "I love you, but it's none of your business." "But son," he said, "I raised you better. When you were a child, Oh, please don't give me this nonsense about how you taught me right and wrong and how to live by the good book. I make a sound. You did all that crap, and look where it got you. Besides, this isn't about you and me. We both know it's a ploy to get me to talk to Katie about what she did. It's her way of trying to convince me that it's somehow my fault, like I did something to make her open her legs for Josh, and we should forgive each other and move on with our lives. By the time it's over, we'll all be sitting around the fire singing Kumbaya and trying to make waves. To hell with it, I don't buy it. Tell her I'll have a lawyer soon, and we'll sit down and talk when the documents are ready and she signs them." He nodded at me and walked back to his car. I loved my father, but I didn't respect him. Events moved quickly over the next few days. I found a lawyer, and he drew up divorce papers. To be honest, the lawyer I hired was not the best. He was the cheapest. He even downloaded documents from the internet. I was fine with that. I didn't want to spend an extra quarter to get rid of this mess. However, he did me one great favor. He went and saw Josh. He made Josh and me sign non-harassment agreements or some other legal crap. This basically meant that Josh wouldn't sue me or blame me for beating him, and I wouldn't sue him for ruining my marriage. I'm sure Pearl had something to do with it. I found out later that she liked the new Josh. Actually, I liked him too, since he was now technically a eunuch. He had no problem with the excess testosterone running through his system, and life had become easier for all of us. He was much more agreeable and much less of a creep. Katie received the documents when they were handed to her by a courier girl who looked bored and was chewing gum. She didn't sign them. Her lawyer immediately requested a settlement meeting to reject my offer. My lawyer told me it was some kind of maneuver. He said that technically they should have sent us a counteroffer, especially because my proposal was more of an insult to her. My suggestion was that Katie should just take her things and leave. No alimony, no support, nothing. I wasn't going to pay her a dime for cheating. My lawyer told me it was basically an insult. I told him that she insulted me by cheating on me in my own home. We gathered in Katie's lawyer's office. As I looked around, I noticed that her lawyer had some good stuff. Good things are expensive and must be paid for. She looked at me across the table and smiled. She did everything. Her hair was done, and she wore an outfit that I loved. It made her but look less fat. She had clearly had her makeup done professionally. "How do you pay for all this?" I asked. "You don't have a job." Her lawyer visibly tensed when I said this. "Your mom and dad lent me some money," she said. "I thought we'd pay them back after we got back together." I immediately started laughing. "What's so funny, honey?" she asked. "We're here to talk about our divorce," I said. "What makes you think we'll get back together?" "I love you, silly," she said. "We'll be just like your parents." If this had been 5 years ago, the look I gave her would have been like the one the wrestler known as The Rock gives, the one called the people's eyebrow. Suddenly, her lawyer, my lawyer, and I all exchanged glances. Our expressions said the same thing: women are crazy. "Can we go back to the divorce?" asked my lawyer. "Sounds like a plan," her lawyer said. "We have prepared a theoretical counterproposal that I would like you to consider in case we cannot somehow make things work between the two of you. But before we talk about such unpleasant things as divorces and settlements, may I suggest a consultation?" "I don't want to talk about any of this," Katie complained. "You guys can work on the numbers. I'm just here to talk to my husband and try to explain what happened and why." I looked at the papers her lawyer handed me and started laughing. "What's so funny?" asked her lawyer. "This settlement builds on recent settlements obtained in similar cases in this state. Remember the episode of Star Trek when Spock fell in love with that human woman? I feel like I want to tell you what Kirk told him." He looked at me curiously. "You're out of your Vulcan mind," I said, imitating Shatner's iconic manner. "No way. I'm not going to give this anything but air an opportunity," I said. "What opportunity?" she asked. "If you're talking about staying married, I'll accept it." "I was actually talking about getting away from you," I said. "Brian, if you can't listen to reason, I'll take every damn cent you have," she said. "If we go to court, neither of us will be happy. I'm not being unreasonable here. All I want is to go back to what we had. You don't even know why this happened. You didn't even bother to explain it to me. If we go to court, your fifth place is grass." "Are you threatening me?" I asked. "Take it as you will," she said. "You'll either get everything you've always had, including me, or you'll get nothing. I'll take it all." "To hell with you, Katie," I chuckled. I stood up so quickly that the chair I was sitting on fell behind me with a crash. I walked out of the office, leaving Katie screaming for me to come back. I was a lot angrier than I thought. Since the beginning of this farce, I had done the same thing as many men. I tried to just move forward. This is one of the things that men do. We are taught from an early age not to show weakness. "Never show that you are crying, son," our fathers always told us. We all knew that if even our friends found out that we had even an ounce of emotion, they would turn on us like wolves and eat us alive. And they would do it with serious intent or just as the kind of banter that occurs in long friendships. So we learn to hide our emotions and keep everything inside. Damn, I loved Katie. I loved her so much that I competed with Josh for her my whole life. But once I married her, the competition had to end. You can't live with, eat with, sleep with, and have a night with someone for over 12 years without some kind of emotional connection. You don't stay with a person for years, watching them change and grow, without loving them. Even as Katie changed over the years, I still loved her. While her mind became narrower and her fifth place wider, my love for her only grew. Although I tried to keep it to myself, the pain of her betrayal grew stronger every day until that day. My goal was to just get through it, get a divorce and get rid of her so I could mourn and start my life over. She wouldn't let me do this. She kept calling and showing up, and it only got worse. In fact, it started to make me hate Katie. In the end, I got my comeuppance on Josh. I beat him to a pulp and changed his life forever. In a way, I made Pearl's life better because Josh didn't cheat on her anymore. But Katie was supposed to be my wife. Her betrayal hurt the most. All I did was try to stay away from her. My mind, my spirit, my honor screamed for punishment for her too, but I just couldn't bring myself to do anything. When I got home, I went for a run, my mind working overtime trying to figure out a way to get her to sign the damn divorce papers and agree to a settlement that didn't include an unfair amount of my assets. Why the hell can't women who are divorced work? For thousands of years, women have been told that they are equal to men, right? So why the hell, when a couple gets divorced, do even women who work need something from their husbands? As I pondered this and other questions, the miles melted away, and with them, some of my tension. When I finished the run, I felt better, some of my stress was gone. But the questions I was pondering still didn't have answers. The old man I always met in the park motioned for me to come over. I wasn't in the mood for another dose of his life story but still approached. There's some weak point in my DNA, I always have to talk to other runners and anyone who drives a Mustang. It's like we're all one big weird family. He looked at me as if he had found the answer to world peace. Remember what you told me that day? He asked. I nodded. Remember how you said you wanted to just disappear? He asked. Yes, but it was a fantasy, I said. She would have hunted me down anyway as soon as I tried to get a job, that is unless I wanted to work as a nomadic farm worker or something where I got paid under the table. I must admit that I'm too damn spoiled to do this. That's why I went to college. I'm addicted to a certain standard of living to be happy. Katie wasn't necessarily one of them, but I need cable TV. I need my Mustang. I need Wi-Fi. I know it's stupid, but that's me. But do you have to be you? He asked, smiling. I began to wonder if his aneurysm had damaged the rubber band supplying his brain. Seeing the puzzled expression on my face, he extended his hand. He handed me his dead son's social security card and driver's license, and my jaw dropped. He also handed me a folder, and as I looked through it, my slack-jawed expression turned into a smile. I hugged the old man and thanked him warmly, then I jumped into my car and took off. I had it all. I had a degree that wasn't too far removed from the one I actually got. I had a military ID. I had complete school records. I even had some outstanding school loans that I could start paying off as soon as I found a new job. The old man had given me a new life, and on the way to that new life, I was going to give Katie hell. Over the next few days, I had a completely different life. Katie and her lawyer set up a meeting, and I laughed and hung up. I listed my house with a real estate agent and asked for a quick sale. I started looking for another city to live in. I put Katie aside for a week or so until my father came to see me. Brian, Katie is going crazy, he said. She spends half her time yelling at everyone and being a stupid, and the rest of the time she cries. She really loves you and wants to come back to you. Dad, this is my life. I need you to stay away from her, I said. Brian, don't try to turn this into a discussion about how you don't approve of my choices, he told me. Just talk to her. You guys have been married 12 years. You owe her a lot. I don't owe her a damn thing, Dad, I snapped. What about what she owes me? What about not sleeping with other guys? Does she owe me this? Because if so, then I'd say that we're ready for the same. Just think about it, son. Whatever you decide in the end, I know you will make the best choice for yourself. But at least talk to her. Who knows? Maybe it will change your mind. I'll talk to her, Father, I said. Tell her to come over after my run tonight. But I'm not talking to her because I'm indebted to her. The only thing I owe that woman is the amount we agreed on in advance. I'm talking to her because I'm indebted to you, Dad. I thought about it for a few days, and although he never told me in that moment, I realized something. Seeing my father come here with his tail between his legs and begging for something that meant nothing to him taught me everything I needed to know. I love my father, but until I understood what was behind his actions, I did not respect him. I think I understand him better now, and my respect has increased accordingly. In fact, it was Pearl's words that convinced me that my father was a bigger man than I was. When I returned home that day, I was very stressed. I wasn't expecting the drama that I was sure Katie would bring. I received a call and was surprised to find Pearl on the other end of the line. Brian, can we come over? She asked. Define us, I said. Brian, you know what I'm talking about, she replied. We, Josh and I. As always, we are still married, as are you and Katie. He wants to tell you something. Okay, I said. But just so you know, the only reason Katie and I are still married is because she won't sign the damn papers. There was silence on the line for a moment, and I realized what I had done. For most of the time I knew her, Pearl didn't swear. During that problem with Josh, she slipped a couple of times, but that was understandable. Sorry, Pearl, I said quietly. We'll be done soon. She said. I started doing strength training, but that day I just wasn't having it. I was almost glad when the doorbell rang and I had to answer. Pearl was as beautiful as ever, but Josh had changed a lot. He seemed to have gained at least 10 or 12 pounds in the last few weeks. He looked different too, much more timid. Brian, I wanted to apologize for everything, he said. Maybe I overreacted, I said. No, you didn't, he replied. In those circumstances, I think I would have done the same thing. But that's not what I apologized for. I apologized for everything. Ever since we met when we were kids, I've never been a very good friend, and I'd like to erase it all and start over. He held out his hand for me to shake. I was shocked. I shook his hand and almost threw up in my mouth. His hand was sticky and soft. It was a terrible handshake, like a dead fish. I expected Josh to try to break my damn fingers like he always did, but this was clearly a different Josh. Brian, don't rush into having a night with Katie again, he said as they prepared to leave. I've had a couple of STDs, and Katie may have them too, but I want you to know one thing. This time, it wasn't just me. Katie came for me. She desperately wanted to have an affair with someone. She just chose me first because we knew each other and were comfortable with each other. If it weren't for me, it would have been someone else. And luckily, you caught her the first time. There must be something that motivates her because it's definitely not intim. He shrugged, and they left. Pearl paused for a moment. Well, Brian, she said, all's well that ends well, and I owe it all to you. She smiled at me, but something was happening behind those beautiful eyes. They left, and I, still puzzled, went for a run. I had a great run but didn't see the old man. I wondered where he went but didn't dwell on it. On the way home, I received the call I had been waiting for. My realtor had a firm offer on the house. I told her to take it and work out the details as quickly as possible. When I arrived at the house, Katie was waiting for me. She had dressed up again and done her hair. She was wearing a skirt that would have looked attractive on a slimmer woman, but with a fifth place as big as hers, it just looked cheap. She was wearing stockings, the kind with garters, and as she sat on the porch, I looked right up her skirt. It really looked like she wasn't wearing any panties underneath the whole outfit. I started laughing. What's so funny, honey? She asked. Then she noticed where I was looking. See anything you like? She asked shyly. If you try, maybe you can convince me that we should talk in bed. It's been a long time for both of us, and there's no reason why we can't take some of the stress off while we figure this out. I laughed even louder. Katie, you came here to talk, I said. Your inability to keep your legs closed is what brought us here. Ever since I caught you with Josh, you've been saying you need to explain this. Here's your chance to give me this great explanation. Explain everything to me. I'm waiting to hear this wonderful revelation because I can't understand why you did what you did. Katie, our life wasn't perfect, but it was good. I loved you more than you will ever know. So come on, explain why you destroyed us. She just looked at me for a while, then a single tear rolled down her cheek. Brian, I love you too, she said. And like you said, our life has been good. We had fights and everything, but it was a good life. I just wanted it to be better. I looked at some of the other couples for a while, one in particular. Some of them didn't have as good a relationship as we did, but there's one couple I am so jealous of. They go everywhere together, they do everything together. If she goes to get her hair done, he goes with her to the beauty salon. He takes her with him when he goes to get his hair cut. She is the hostess at his poker nights. It's so romantic that I'm just dying of envy. You can imagine them together forever. That's what I wanted for us. Brian, she said. Who are these crazy people? I asked. These are the nuts who raised you, Brian said. I started laughing. I want us to have a marriage like your parents, I said. I asked your mother for advice. I thought maybe they had something that we had lost. But after talking with her, I realized that we were stronger than them. Your mom told me that she felt the same way I did. She thought they weren't going anywhere and she was just bored. She made a mistake. She fell for the bait of a clever scammer and ended up having an affair with him. Your father found out, and they had a very difficult time, but they got back together because they loved each other so much. Even now, years later, they are still stronger because of it. I think maybe before her affair, they were in a place where they took each other for granted, but they realized that they loved each other too much for that. Now, they live every day as if it were their last. She looked at me dreamily, and there was a sparkle in her eyes. I couldn't hold it in any longer, so I fell to the floor laughing. When I looked at her, she was still sitting there with a stupid look on her face. "Is it really that funny?" she asked. After a few more laughs, I wiped the tears from my eyes and sat back down in my chair. "Okay, you've spoken. Can I get a divorce now?" I asked cheerfully. "Brian, you're out of your mind," she said. "Why do you still want a divorce? Can't you see that this was all to make us a better couple?" "Katie, we were married for 12 damn years," I began. "Have you ever seen or heard me even talk to my mother?" "Well, no," she said. "You really love your father, but you also have a strange relationship with him." "It's because my father made a mistake," I snapped. "My mother cheated on him. She gave you the Disney version of what happened. My father broke his back every day at work while she sat on her fifth place, watching soap operas and eating chocolate. I was at school most of the time, so she didn't have anything to do. That's why she was bored. When my father found out, they didn't go through a difficult period. He kicked her cheating fifth place out, and she came back to him crying. Her affair lasted several months. When he found out, he kicked her out, and she realized she couldn't cope on her own. Her lover didn't want her. It's a simple rule, just like with you and Josh. Josh is married to a better-looking and nicer woman than you. For him, it was never about you or even intimate. It was about proving he was better than me. He wanted to prove he could take something away from me, and he did. Unfortunately for him, it changed his damn life." I looked at her, and she stepped away from me. "My father follows my mother everywhere she goes, just like you said, Katie. But it's not because they are so deeply in love. It's because he doesn't trust her any further than he can throw her, and with his arthritis, he can't even lift her. Even after all these years, he doesn't trust her enough to let her out of his sight. This is not how I plan to live. I will never forgive my mother for what she did to our family, Katie. This is why I don't talk to her or invite her to family gatherings. I give my father gifts for Christmas and his birthday and just ignore my mother. The reason I had such a strange relationship with my father was that I loved him, but I didn't respect him. Deep down, I always considered him a wuss, or better yet, a cuckold for allowing that woman back into our lives. I've been thinking about this a lot lately and realized I was wrong about my father. I respect him, and I'm so sorry I didn't do this all these years." She was still looking at me in shock. "So what changed your mind about your father?" she asked. "I was just thinking about it and realized there was a difference between my father's situation and mine," I said. "You mean your mother cheated many times, but I only cheated once?" she smiled. "No, Katie," I said. "My mother admitted that the guy she cheated with was really sneaky and somehow tricked her. Maybe it gave her some kind of excitement, but it wasn't what she was looking for initially. You, on the other hand, were looking for Josh. So that makes you an even bigger expletive than my mother, and you know how I feel about her. The difference between my father and me is me," she said. "I could easily leave your cheating fifth place and get a divorce because I only care about myself. My father hated my mother as much as I hate you, but he had a child to take care of. In those days, there were no kindergartens everywhere. He had to do everything possible to keep me safe and cared for, so he endured it and took her back. He did it for me." She looked stunned. "You know me, Katie. You know how much I value loyalty and trust, and now you know why. I'm so sorry for my father. He was chained to a woman he no longer trusted for so long just for me. But they love each other." Katie stammered, "And I love you, Brian. I don't love you now. I hate what you did to us, but I will never trust you again. I'm not going to live like my father, following you everywhere and watching everything you do. That will be like a prison. Divorce will be better for both of us. Brian, I will do whatever you say." "This will never happen again," she said quickly. "I misjudged you. Your mother didn't tell me the whole story. Don't try to blame everything on brainless Betty," I said. "You had a choice. You just made the wrong one. I really think you saw an opportunity to relive some of the fun you had in the old days with Josh and took it. You just used the 'my mom said' excuse. So can we both move on with the divorce and our lives?" "No, Brian," she said sharply. If we get divorced, I'll take every damn penny you have. It will be much better for you to keep me. You'll keep all your things. You'll get all the intim you want. All you have to do is forgive me once. I swear I will be the best wife a man can have. You should have stopped while you were behind, I said. See you in court. You can come and pick up your things on Saturday. No, Brian, she smiled. I know you own the house. You bought it before we got engaged. But this has been my primary residence for the past 12 years. This means that if I get a restraining order, I can still live here until the court settles our divorce. So you'll have a housemaid, honey. My lawyer is confident he can get a restraining order by Saturday. It's just 4 days from now. See you soon, dear. I bet you won't last longer than Wednesday. Katie, Josh told me personally that he had several STDs. I will never sleep with you again. Good night. You really should have accepted my settlement offer. I got up and went into the house, leaving her sitting on the porch with her mouth open in shock. The next day, I came to work and told my boss that, due to a family crisis, I needed to quit and that day would be my last. I rented a U-Haul truck and loaded it with all my stuff. I took it to my new apartment in a city 400 miles south of us. I returned the truck to U-Haul and rented a car trailer. I hitched the trailer to my Jeep 2 days later and took my Mustang to my new apartment. I came back and went into work on Thursday to pick up my last check. I received a check for the sale of my house, too. I deposited both checks into a new bank account under a new name. I once again quietly thanked the crazy old man and went to start a new life. I kept in touch with my father using a cheap tracker phone that I bought with cash at a gas station. My father was the only person I called on this phone. I changed the number on my iPhone. When I called my dad that first week, he told me how angry Katie was that I sold the house and moved. When she arrived and found all her things on the side of the road waiting for the garbage truck, she went crazy and broke into the house. The new owners, an elderly couple in their 70s, explained to her that they had just bought the house and had just moved in. Katie couldn't do anything about it. The sale was completely legal. I also completely emptied our accounts. Katie was left penniless. She had no pot to pee in and no window to throw it out of. My father laughed for an hour telling me about all her threats and the names she called me. The more we talked, the clearer it became that my father was proud of what I had done. I was lucky enough to do something he never could. Over the next few weeks, I called my father frequently. Over time, I began to feel tension in him. I asked him what was going on. Son, Katie and your mother are going crazy. Your mom keeps filling this girl's head with crap, and Katie seems to be out of her mind because she believes it. In her head, you broke her heart. They made me pay for a private investigator to find you. So far, he hasn't found anything. You covered your tracks well. I guess you have all the new credit cards and everything. Because they can't find you, hell, after reading the reports, and they are very detailed, I would almost believe that you simply ceased to exist, too. Okay, Dad, I said. I tried to be nice to that woman. I tried to get a fair and legal divorce from her, but she wanted to play games. Then I tried to just go my way and let her have her way. But I see that Katie and Mom are putting a lot of pressure on you, both emotionally and financially. So I'll take that off your shoulders. You'll have to deal with Mom on your own. It will take me a few days to arrange everything. He said he could withstand that much time, and I started planning. I made a few friends in the month or so that I was here. Some of them became very good friends, especially Jeff Withers. Jeff drove a Mustang GT that was the same generation as mine and had added many of the same performance parts that I did. Jeff convinced me to join the local chapter of the Mustang Club of America. I wasn't a big fan of clubs, but they turned out to be really great people and we had a lot in common. Jeff was a single guy who loved traveling and women. Getting Jeff's apartment for a while was easy. After living here for a month, I had to give up my apartment and buy a house outside the city. Living in an apartment just wasn't for me. I needed a spacious living space. I was building a deck and landscaping my backyard. There was also the fact that no matter what city you live in, crime is a part of life. When I lived in an apartment, I had to park the Mustang either on the street or in the parking spaces behind the building. In both cases, my car was exposed to both the weather and criminal elements. Once I bought the house, I felt much better. My car felt better once it had its own garage again, or so I thought. Like I said, getting Jeff's apartment was easy, but convincing him to exchange cars for a week was more difficult. I had to promise that I would let him throw a couple of parties at my house during the year. I also had to agree to let him park his Mustang in the second space in my double garage for the coming winter. My Jeep would have to be left outside, but heck, that's what Jeeps are for. Once all the details of my plan were worked out, I needed to catch a fish. Unlike most fish, women are cunning and suspicious. I had to make her work for it. If I had just given her the information, Katie and my mom probably would have smelled a trap. I had to make it look like they were outsmarting me. I called my dad at a time when I knew he would be having dinner with my mom and Katie. We rehearsed his lines in advance. It was a lot of fun listening to him play on the phone. Yeah, he said, I can do it. Where is it? Oh, it's still in the old garage. Do you think they'll let me take it? Okay, you already called them. Where? Wait, let me grab a pen and paper. Okay, where should I send this? Wait, I'm recording. Do you think I'm stupid or what? Yes, I will destroy the address as soon as I send the package. You don't trust me? Send me the address instead. It's still good if you can get your things. Okay, bye. When he said bye, Dad hadn't actually hung up yet, and I heard Katie and my mom interrogating him over the still open phone line. Who was it, dear? Asked my mom. Just a guy I know, my dad said. He needs me to do something for him. I'll probably run and do it after dinner. Will you come with me? It was Brian, wasn't it? Katie snapped. I can't believe you talked to him all this time and didn't tell me anything. Blood is thicker than mud, my father said. You didn't tell me either, Mom snapped. And I am his mother. He's also of my blood, my father said. He hasn't considered you his mother since, well, you know when. Where is he? Katie asked. I just need to see him. If I could just talk to him, I'm sure I could convince him to come back. As soon as we were together again, I would be out of your house and out of your hair. No way, my father said. Honey, then just tell me, Mom said. This is not happening, my father said. It can get pretty cold in the bedroom, Mom hinted. Woman, you really need to think about what you're saying, my father hissed. We are over 60, it's always cold in our bedroom. If I need to stay warm, I either turn up the heat or put another blanket on the bed. You need to think about the fact that winter is coming. It will be damn cold on the streets, too. Remember what it was like the last time you were alone, and you are no longer a spring chicken. Until the end of the conversation, my mother did not utter a single word. I laughed until I dropped. I don't trust any of you, my father said. He tore the paper he had written the address on from the notepad, crumpled it up just like we planned, and burned it with a lighter. I'm not an old man yet, he said. I remember most of the address. After dinner, he and my mother went to my old house. I'd already called the new owners and asked them to give my dad a box of junk and pretend it was important. They realized that sometimes you need to joke with older people. They ended up inviting my mom and dad over for coffee, and they had a good time. I later found out that my mom was very angry that my dad decided to wait until the next day to ship the item because she was hoping to get a copy of the address. When she and my dad went to the FedEx pickup location, she didn't need it. I had already told Dad how cunning Katie is. You can't live with a woman for 12 years and not know how cunning she can be. I made my father write very hard, as if he was angry. I was sure that Katie would figure out the address. According to Dad, when he and Mom returned, Katie was already packing her things. Just as I expected, she did that childish trick where she ran her pencil back and forth across the pad Dad used until she got the address from the imprints left by his pen. She borrowed more money from her mother and left that night. Dad said she even kissed him and Mom goodbye before leaving, supposedly to visit a sick friend. He and Mom really thought they were damn detectives. The funny thing was that she worked so hard to orchestrate her own downfall. I told my new boss that I needed a few days off to sort out a family matter. He agreed but said it had to happen during my vacation. It felt like a kick between the legs because I hadn't been at my job long enough to accumulate enough vacation time, but I decided it was worth it. The next day, I called my father and found out that he had been listening to my mother and Katie on the phone. C had been driving all night and was going to wait for me at the building she thought was where I worked. I drove there in Jeff's Mustang and went inside. She moved her car closer to Jeff's car and waited for me. Jeff had only one office in a huge building. There were shops, doctors' and lawyers' offices, and many other businesses, including a movie theater. Kathy had no idea what office or business I worked for, and I actually worked on the other side of town. I spent the first few hours of the morning window shopping, then I grabbed Jeff and his lovely secretary and took them to lunch. Jeff and I pretended not to notice Katie following us. We talked loudly about what we were doing, including me bragging that I would leave at 3 that day. "Are you on a hot date?" Jeff asked. "Maybe," I replied. "I won't know how hot it is until I bring her home. I haven't had a night in so long that I think I've forgotten how to do it. I'd probably screw everything that isn't nailed down right now." "Even me?" Jeff's secretary asked. "Sorry, Annabelle," I said. "You are too nice a woman for this. Maybe when I get over my emotional problems, we can talk. Besides, you were married." Katie's face grew angrier by the second as she sat in the booth behind us. I noticed that she walked strangely when she entered the restaurant. It took me a while to realize that she had been waiting outside for me the entire time and couldn't go to the bathroom. She managed to quickly relieve herself in the ladies' room of the restaurant and now was angry at my carefree lifestyle. Jeff and Annabelle both called me Brian rather than Carl, my new name. She followed us back into the building as we left the restaurant, which made me think she wanted to confront me alone and not with my friends. I was sure she also wanted to follow me home. I could always find another job, but it would take me a while to find another place to live if I just tried to disappear again. That afternoon, I made sure Jeff's cell phone was on speed dial. Then I went to the cinema to watch the new film The Bourne Legacy. I wanted to watch a spy drama to cheer myself up for the day. As soon as the movie ended, I returned to my car. It was a few minutes after 2. I waved to a few people as I walked through the parking lot and spoke to them as if I knew them. Everything about me said that I had been here for a long time and this was part of my daily life. I got into Jeff's Mustang and drove relatively slowly back to his apartment. What happened next was one of my favorite parts of the entire script. The day before, I bought ice cream from a passing truck for the many kids playing in front of Jeff's house. When I got out of the car, they all ran up to me. Some of them pointed me out to their mothers, and I waved to them. I was sure Katie was even angrier because a couple of these young mothers were attractive. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her get out of the car and approach me. I dove into the building. I had to act quickly. I told the doorman to let Katie in. He remembered me because Jeff and I had talked to him earlier. He helped us for 2 reasons. First, we paid him $50. Second, being a divorced guy, he was always ready to help a cheater, especially after he himself was robbed during a divorce. I got into the elevator alone and went to the 5th floor, where Jeff lived. I was sure I was walking slowly enough for Katie to see which floor the elevator stopped on. I waited near the elevators until the next one arrived. As soon as the doors opened, I yelled, "Okay, see you later," to the imaginary person at the end of the hallway. That way, Katie wouldn't think I was waiting for her. She would have heard the end of the conversation and thought I had stopped to talk to one of the neighbors. I walked down the hallway and fiddled with the keys to Jeff's apartment to give her a chance to get closer. As soon as I opened the door, she burst into the apartment behind me. "Hi, Brian," she said smugly. "Did you miss me?" "Katie," I exclaimed, fighting shock, "how did you find me?" "It's fate," she said. "We are meant to be together." She walked around the living room, touching various objects but not taking her eyes off me. "Well, it's a little tight for the 2 of us, but we'll manage until we find something bigger. Plus, it's cozy. It will bring us closer once we get used to it," she said. "What are you talking about, crazy woman?" I asked. "We won't get back together." "Brian, we don't need to get back together. We're married," she blurted out. "I tried to divorce you," I blurted back. "PFF, I blocked it," she said smugly. That's why I left town, I countered. Just because we're married doesn't mean we have to live together, she said. What you did was run away from me. This is abandonment of the family, which again is grounds for divorce. I don't want a divorce, Brian, she said. I want us back together, and now. Listen, Katie, we need to have a serious talk about all this, I said in a very depressed tone. I have a date tonight and I need to get ready. She is a very good girl and I would not like to disappoint her. I guess you'll be spying on me on this date too, huh? No, Brian, she said, with a strange expression on her face. I think I let her know that I saw how she was watching me. I also think she realized that if she left the apartment, I wouldn't let her back in again. I'll wait here in our apartment, she said, smiling. Don't bring that girl home. I wouldn't want to embarrass you in front of her. Besides, as you told your friends, this is a date just to get some night. You have everything you need right here. No thanks, I said. I like to clean myself from disease, as you know. Just come back so I can talk to you. We need to figure things out. Things between us are getting out of control. And Brian, I saw you with those kids in front of the building, and I saw how half of their mothers looked at you as a dad. I was busy getting ready for my non-existent date. I collected several small objects that she touched and put them in my pocket. Then I leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. She smiled, and I took the box of trinkets. Katie, can you hand me my watch? I have my hands full, I said. She looked at the table and picked up the large gold fake Rolex that Jeff used to impress rich women. Wow, nice watch, she said, looking at it. Maybe we should buy me a women's watch to match. I have my hands full, I said. So, what do you want now? Goodbye kiss, she said. Ah, I can do this, she said. Come back soon. I closed the door and immediately dialed Jeff's number on speed dial. On the other side of town, Jeff called 911 and drove home. I wore gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints and left Jeff's fake watch in the front seat of Katie's car, which she had forgotten I had the key to. I put the other small items she touched in the back seat and the entire box of trinkets in her trunk. Jeff had just pulled up as I walked away from her car. We shook hands, exchanged car keys, and paid the doorman for his part in the fun. As soon as I left the parking lot, police cars arrived. I stopped to let them pass, as a good citizen should when there are official vehicles nearby with their sirens on. I called home and talked to my father. There was no need for further staging, so I used my iPhone. Hi Dad, I said. Her fifth place is toast and I've already turned on the lawnmower. My mom picked up the phone. Brian, is that you? Did Katie find you? She asked. I hung up. The next night, I ate steak with Jeff while he told me what happened after I left. He called the police to report the break-in and said that the thief was still there. The police arrived with their sirens on and went up to his apartment. When they found Katie sitting on his couch, getting comfortable, they were as shocked as he was. Katie claimed that this was her and her husband's apartment, but Jeff told them that this was his apartment and he had been living there for over 4 years. Jeff also told them that he had never heard of or met anyone named Brian. The doorman, of course, confirmed Jeff's words, as did the building manager. The doorman said he saw Katie coming in and out several times throughout the day, and Katie claimed he was lying. Jeff began asking about several things that had disappeared from his apartment. The officers followed Katie to her car and found several items, including the watch Jeff was asking about, in Katie's car. Jeff told them he was on vacation for a few days and wasn't there. The police told Jeff that there had been many cases where people's apartments had been robbed and vandalized while they were on vacation. After they booked Katie on suspicion of burglary and took her fingerprints, they found her prints on several items from Jeff's apartment and put her in jail. Katie used her bail to call my mom. Her father refused to bail her out or provide her with a lawyer, so she got a public defender. Katie told the police over and over that she entered the apartment to be with her husband Brian. The police recorded her information. She also told them that I worked in a large office building downtown and was friends with many of the workers there. They checked and found no record of me working in any office or business in the building. The police had what they considered a pretty strong case. They found her in an apartment that did not belong to her without the owner's permission. They also found several items in her car that had been stolen from the apartment, most of which had her fingerprints on them. Things weren't looking in her favor. Katie refused to take a deal, so a few weeks later, the judge sentenced her to 5 to 7 years for burglary, theft, and home invasion. It turned out that we were lucky. The judge himself had his house broken into while he was on vacation and was determined to make Katie's sentence harsh. Katie was supposed to serve her sentence in a women's prison near our hometown. Her lawyer managed to get this for her, meaning that at least her mother could visit her while she was in prison. It also meant that since my wife was a convicted felon, my divorce was a child's play, and I was a happy camper. I couldn't resist twisting the knife one last time, so I went to her prison. I knocked on the glass, and the partition opened, allowing us to see each other. "Hi, Kat. You look good in that orange jumpsuit," I said. "You, Brian," she hissed. "When you leave here, Katie," I said, cutting her off in the coldest voice I could muster, "shut up and leave while you're falling behind. You cheated on me and ruined what was a good marriage. I tried twice to let you slip away, but you kept insisting you deserved what you got. Next time you start any crap with me, it will be worse. When you get out of prison, you will be over 40. You'll have enough life left to start over if you find someone who wants it. On the other hand, if you want to have an intimate with me, I will have at least 5 years to figure out how to lock you up for a much longer period." I walked away, leaving her looking at me through the glass, thinking about what I said. Finally, my spirits lifted, and I felt good again. I stopped by my dad's house to wish him well, and we talked for a while on the porch. "I still can't believe you pulled through that, son," he said, laughing. My mother walked to the door and looked at me. "Hi, Bree," she began, but then thought better of it and returned to the house. "You know, son, someday you will have to forgive her," my father said. "And I think that someday I will have to let her off the leash and start trusting her too. We can't hold a grudge forever." I nodded. That was the first time I realized that I also had a lot of life ahead of me. It was time for me to think about what I wanted to do in the future instead of focusing on Katie in the past. Katie ruined her life. Yes, the mistakes she made were caused by the lies my mother told her, but she always had a choice. Now I also had a choice, and my choice was to spend the rest of my life searching for someone I could trust. I stepped off the porch and headed to the car for the long drive home. As soon as I got to the car, Pearl came out of my dad's living room with a box in her hands and asked me where she should put it. I was puzzled. "Okay, we can put this in the trunk," she said. The box didn't fit in my trunk, so we had to unload all the items from it and put them in the trunk separately. Pearl looked really good in her cut-off shorts and halter top. Her long blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail. "Can I give you a ride somewhere, Pearl?" I asked. She just smiled at me and went back into the house. When she returned, she had her son in her arms. He was asleep. She placed him in the back seat and laid a blanket over him. "Okay, we're ready," she said. "We can always come back for the rest of our stuff." She sat in the front passenger seat and stretched out her long, sculpted legs. My dad was giving either her or me the thumbs-up sign from the porch. "I like your father," she said, waving at him. I noticed my mother come out onto the porch as I started the engine, but she didn't wave. "I'm really sorry, honey, but I don't really like your mom." "I think she's crazy," Pearl said. That was enough for me. "So, what's going on here, Pearl?" I asked. "When I was growing up, I always dreamed of a nice house, a husband, and 3 children," she said. "I had a nice house, but you ruined everything. I had a husband, but he was not a very good husband, and you ruined everything too. I still have 2 children missing. You ruined everything too." She looked at me and smiled. My knees were weak. "You ruined Josh when you, caught him with his wife. He has changed a lot since then, but he has changed too much. We went from me hating him because he cheated on me constantly to me hating him because he became completely anti-night. He founded his own religion and turned our house into his church. All sorts of people gather there. I don't want him to go crazy. Plus, damn it, Brian, I have needs. I'm not easy to get or anything like that, but I'm a grown woman." "I noticed," I said, interrupting her. She blushed when she saw me looking at her top. Thanks for the compliment, but keep your eyes on the road, she said shyly. Besides, you'll see a lot more of this once we get home anyway. You also took the chance that he gave me 2 other children, and that's a dream I'm not ready to give up. I just need to find the right guy, and everything will work itself out. I swallowed so loudly that it could be heard through the engine. Your father said he raised you to repay a debt, she said, so I believe that you owe me a house, a husband, and 2 more children. Either that, or you'll have to fill in for me until I get them. That's why I'm moving in with you. If we succeed, I expect that we will get married and that you will get me pregnant at least twice. She placed her hand on top of mine on the gear shift. She looked into my eyes carefully and blinked her huge eyes. Do you think you can handle this? She asked. I nodded my head woodenly and thanked the Lord that this was not reality. I found myself trapped in one of those internet stories where the average Joe can get rid of his cheating wife and end up with the prettiest woman in town. What do you think of our story today? In my opinion, the wife in this story is absolutely wrong, but I really like the husband's action. He has already done the right thing. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. Until new videos.